Hello. Thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. Now, let's dive into the details of today's story. There are things you only notice when you've been invisible for a while. For me, it was the gum. Her name's Hai. We've been married 18 years. She used to hate chewing gum, said it looked trashy. But about 6 months ago, she started again. At first, I thought it was stress. Then I realized it was habit or worse, nostalgia. Maybe he chews gum. Maybe she was chewing his brand. You start seeing patterns when you've got nothing else to hold on to. My name's Warren, by the way. I'm not dramatic. I've been quiet my whole life. When father died, I didn't cry, not because didn't love him, but because I never learned how to release pain properly. I knew that. She used to say she liked my stillness. She said it grounded her. Now I think it just made me easy to ignore. We lived in Wisconsin, a sleepy town where neighbors wave even when they secretly hate you. I worked night shifts at a printing plant. Hai was dental receptionist. We had 2 dogs, no kids, never could. We tried a lot. The distance began subtly. She stopped texting back when I was on my break. Started going to bed before I came home. Left the porch light off more nights than not. But it was the silence that really crushed me. The kind of silence that breathes around you like it's watching. I tried to ask her what was wrong. Once in the kitchen, she was cutting cucumbers. Didn't even look up. Said, "It's nothing. You're imagining it." I wish had imagined it. She got a new hairstyle. Bought a perfume that smelled like tangerines and musk. Something I'd never complimented. She started listening to indie acoustic playlist while folding laundry. We used to fold together, remember dumb sitcoms, talk about groceries like they were adventures. Now it was just her and that guitar whispering through her earbuds. I could walk in and out of the room, she wouldn't flinch. I was furniture. Went 2 weeks without saying a full sentence to her. She didn't notice. Then one night I came home early. My shift had been cut because a machine jammed. I pulled into the driveway and saw her car. The living room light was off. Bedroom light was on, but I didn't hear her voice. I heard a man's low, confident, laughing. I didn't burst in. I didn't scream. I just stood in the driveway holding a bag of gas station snacks, staring at my own front door. Felt like watching someone else's life. Eventually, the light went off. He left. I never saw his face. Just heard the tail end of a conversation through the cracked window. He's clueless. Honestly, I don't even think he'd care. Maybe she was right because I didn't storm inside. I walked to the park a block down, sat on a bench, watched raccoon tip over trash bin, and drag out a sandwich wrapper like it was gold. I stayed there till sunrise, and when I walked back home, she was in bed pretending to be asleep. The gum wrapper was on her nightstand. Wintergreen. That was the moment something in me folded quietly half. The next few days I didn't confront her. I just watched, documented. I set up my old tablet in the hallway coat closet, camera angled at the living room. I wasn't even looking for revenge. I think just needed proof that I hadn't gone insane. And what I got was worse than expected. He'd been there before more than once. He kissed her by the back door. He used my favorite coffee mook. Fed our dogs. She laughed louder for him than she had for me in 5 years. So I made a choice. No screaming, no accusations, no begging her to stay. I waited for a Tuesday morning. I knew she had yoga at 8:30 and a dental staff meeting after. I packed a single duffel bag, took my grandfather's fishing knife, a USB drive with footage, my passport, and an old prepaid phone I hadn't used in years. I left a single note on the kitchen counter. You stopped seeing me, so I made it official. I'm gone, and I disappeared. Not just from her, from everything. And I wasn't running. I was reclaiming what she'd slowly taken my presence. You won't believe what happened next. People think disappearing is loud, that it comes with shouting, smashing things, or some dramatic exit in a storm of suitcases. But I did it with the quiet of a man who had already died months ago. I didn't leave behind a trace, just that one note. I took my name off the shared bank account 2 weeks before, transferred my paycheck to a separate credit union she didn't know existed. I told my job was taking a mental health break and they didn't push back. I think they saw what she refused to see, that I was breaking apart slowly and no one was coming to collect the pieces. I booked a small studio in the next state under my middle name Rhee, not Warren. Reese sounds like someone who travels light. Someone doesn't get tied down with bad love or long explanations. The place was barely livable. One window, broken blinds, a stove that clicked when it was off, but it felt more like home in 5 minutes than my actual house had in 5 years. I kept my phone turned off for the first 2 days. No calls, no texts, notifications. The silence felt new, not like the silence wrapped around me. Cold, dismissive, weaponized. This silence was gentle.
Mine.
I didn't tell Logan, our dog, not a child, because I knew she'd twist it. I imagined she stood in the living room when she finally read the note and laughed or cried both. Maybe she thought I'd be back within a week, like I had nowhere else to go. But I had something better than a plan. I had time. And time, when you've been emotionally starved, is a strange luxury. On the 4th day, I got an email from an old friend, Jalen. We lost touch over the years. He said he'd heard from someone that I left Harry. He asked if I was okay. Didn't respond right away. Then curiosity pulled me in. Who told you? I asked. Haley's cousin. He replied. She's been telling everyone you had a breakdown. Said you just snapped. Snapped? I hadn't raised my voice in over a year. I hadn't argued too. If anything, I've been shrinking into myself every day until I barely made a dent in the bed we used to share. And now she was telling people I went off the rails. But that's what narcissists do, right? They rewrite the story before you get the chance. They hand out edited scripts to everyone before you can open your mouth. Fine, let her talk. I had something she didn't know about. That hidden tablet, the footage. Over the next week, I reviewed hours of it. There he was again. Same guy, sometimes different jackets, same smug voice. I finally got a clean look at his face when he picked up a framed photo of me and set it face down on the shelf. That told me everything I needed to know about his character. But what really shattered me was the moment Hai picked it back up and smiled. Not like she regretted it. Not like felt torn, like she won. The woman I married had died a long time ago. What remained was some version of her designed for someone else. Someone bolder, louder, and crueler. Someone who thought silence was a clever way to suffocate man. And yet, I didn't feel like getting revenge. Not then. Instead, I kept watching. Saw the way she walked differently around him. How she twirled her hair when he laughed. How she rolled her eyes when my name came up. But then something strange happened. One night when I checked the feed remotely, camera showed an empty room. Hours passed. Then she came in alone, drunk, sloppy, crying. She stumbled into the couch and mumbled something I couldn't fully make out. I turned the volume up. Why? Why didn't you fight for me, Warren? I froze. Was she serious? She had erased me from our life with surgical precision. And now she was drunk on the couch asking why I didn't fight. Wanted to scream into the screen. Tell her I did fight. Fought in every silent dinner. In every unanswered text, in every forgotten anniversary. She laughed off as not a big deal. I fought until there was nothing left to defend. But I didn't scream. Hit record. Then I picked up my notebook, the one I've been using to document everything since I left. On the first page I wrote, she started by ignoring me, but now she wants to rewrite history. Time take control of the ending. And so I started planning, not revenge, destruction, a reckoning. I didn't write to make sense of what happened. I wrote to stop myself from forgetting who I used to be. The notebook became my compass. Every night I wrote what saw, remembered, and more importantly, what I refused to let her twist. Hai had already started editing our history for everyone else, but she couldn't rewrite mine. I started each entry the same way. This is the part she won't tell anyone. Like the time she cried in parking lot after losing her job 3 years ago, and I spent the entire night helping her build a new resume while she screamed at me for not understanding corporate pressure. Or the way she once said I was too boring to travel with. So she took girls' trips every spring. I believed her every time. But there's a funny thing about silence. It gives you room to put the puzzle together. 2 weeks into my disappearance, I decided to revisit the house without stepping inside. I just wanted to see it if she'd changed the locks, if she'd parked someone else's car in my driveway. Instead, what I saw nearly made me laugh. There were garbage bags out front filled with what I recognized as my clothes. My old flannel jacket was half hanging out the top, damp from the early morning rain. She didn't even bother to donate them. She just tossed them. That's when I noticed our neighbor, Old Man Clive, watering his front lawn. He was a quiet guy, retired steel worker, always wore aviators, even in the shade. I figured he hated me, but when he saw didn't look surprised. He gave me a slow nod, then walked over without shutting off the hose. She told people you ran off with some woman from work, he said, voice low and tired. But I figured that was a load of crap. I stared at him. She said that. Yeah. Couple times at the block barbecue she hosted. You missed a hell of a show. By the way, your dog peed on her boyfriend's leg. I blinked. Boyfriend? Clive just smirked. Tall guy drives a white Mazda. Real talkative. You want me to take care of the cameras for you? I hadn't even told him I'd set up cameras. This man had seen everything and I had no idea. I'll take care of them soon. I said thanks. He didn't say anything else. Just patted me once on the shoulder, then turned back to his hose. Like we hadn't just cracked the surface of a domestic disaster. Back at the apartment, I felt something shift. Not anger, not sorrow. A strange new sensation, permission. Like someone had just stamped a document in my soul that said, go ahead, do what you need to do. So I called the only person who never liked Hallie from the start, my older sister, June. She answered in one ring. About damn time, she said. Are you alive or hiding in a cave with no Wi-Fi? I hadn't even said hello. I left, told her for good. There was silence, then a breath. "'Kay, where are you?" "Not far. But I don't want anyone knowing." She was quiet again. "Then what do you need from me?" I swallowed. Need help exposing her. Not to ruin her. Just tell the truth without screaming violence. I just want people to see it. June didn't even hesitate. "I'll help, but only if you promise not to crawl back." "I'm not crawling back," I said. "This isn't about getting her back. It's about getting me back." She paused. "Then let's start with her workplace." That's how the plan began. Simple, clean, focused. We started with what I had. Timestamps, footage, audio clips, text backups. I had never thought of myself as meticulous, but now I documented everything like it was court evidence. And hi, she kept running her mouth. That week, she posted a long emotional rant on Facebook about abandonment and emotional abuse, tagged with a photo of her cuddling with a Mazda guy in our backyard hammock. The comments were full of sympathy. "You deserve peace. You've been through so much. Glad you found someone who makes you smile again." I didn't even get mad. I just screen recorded it all. Save the post. Log comments. It was building one piece at a time into something she couldn't spin anymore. And then late one night, my burner phone rang. Unknown number. I picked it up. A voice whispered, "You don't know me, but I what she did. And you're not alone." I sat upright. Who is this? But the line clicked dead. And suddenly, I realized Hai wasn't just lying to me. She had secrets even I hadn't uncovered yet. I didn't sleep that night. After that call, strange, almost whispered voice telling me I wasn't alone. Every shadow in the studio apartment felt alive. I kept replaying it in my head. The voice didn't sound familiar. Not exactly, but it had this slight tremble to it, like whoever spoke was scared and maybe even guilty. The next morning, I drove to a library 2 towns over. I logged into a public computer and created a fresh email account using a fake name and birthday. If Hai or her people were sniffing around, I wasn't about to give them anything trackable. I wrote the following message and sent it to my own encrypted inbox. "If you know something, tell me. I'm not here to destroy her. I just want the truth on record. All of it. Whoever you are, I'm listening." I didn't expect a reply, so I went back to the plan June and I were building. She had reached out to a few of her connections, including someone she used to work with at Haley's old dental clinic. Turns out Hai hadn't just quit her job like she told me. She was fired for unprofessional behavior. They didn't elaborate in the termination letter, just said it had something to do with client boundaries, which is HR code for she got caught doing something personal with someone she shouldn't have. Now I had a new question. Was Mazda Man just the current chapter or one of many? And then, as if the universe wanted to shove the truth down my throat, I got an email. No subject line, one attachment, a short video file, no message body. The name of the file, 07_14 garage camera.mpp4. My heart dropped. That was the day I've been working late. I remembered it specifically because Hai had texted me, "Long day. Going to sleep early. Love you." I opened the file. Grainy, a little blurry. Clearly security footage from a home camera, but it wasn't mine. It was from our next-door neighbor's garage camera pointing across the street. My house, my garage, and her Hai wearing a short dress leaning against the wall laughing. Then him, Mazda Man, walks into frame, lifts her off the ground, and they start. Well, let's just say it didn't leave much to the imagination. Right there in front of the garage in broad daylight, I watched the full 43 seconds. Not for shock value, not for rage. I needed to see it because when you're gaslit long enough, the truth becomes your medicine. There was no sound in the clip, but I could hear it anyway. That laugh she used to reserve for me. The look she used to say for weekend mornings when we'd make pancakes in our pajamas. She'd repurposed every intimacy. And I wasn't even mad. I felt free. That's when it clicked. I didn't need to destroy Harry. She was doing that all by herself. My only job was to step aside and document the wreckage. Later that night, I went to the storage unit where I had stashed most of my things. I hadn't looked through all of it yet. There were 3 sealed plastic bins labeled office stuff, my handwriting from when I moved out. I opened the first 2. Nothing but receipts, backup cables, and old manuals. Then I opened the third. Inside was an old manila folder labeled 2017's copy. I didn't remember packing that. I pulled it out and froze. It was from her old laptop, the one she claimed crashed years ago. I backed up some of her files once, and apparently I kept a copy. Photos, emails, PDFs, even a journal file she must have written in Word. I skimmed it. The first line hit me like a steel bat to the spine. He doesn't excite me anymore. I know that makes me sound awful, but I need more than grocery lists and tax season. I need someone who looks at me like I'm chaos. There it was, in her own words, a confession she never meant for me to see. I kept reading. She talked about a coworker named Evan. How he made her feel alive again. This was 3 years ago, so it wasn't just the Mazda guy. This had been going on for a long time. I was the safety net, the stable placeholder between thrill rides. I leaned back against the concrete wall of storage unit and laughed. Not because any of this was funny, but because I had spent so long blaming myself, wondering what I could have done differently. And all this time, she'd been trying to escape a version of me she never told hated. She wanted fire. I gave her peace. She wanted chaos. I gave her comfort. And she punished me for it by slowly erasing me from the life we built, one choice at a time. So I made a new entry in my notebook that night. I am not a victim. I'm witness. And when this story ends, it won't be with shouting. It'll be with silence. The kind she taught me so well. And that's when I knew what to do next. Not revenge, not exposure, revelation. Because of how he had secrets, then so did I. And mine was about to shift everything. The folder haunted me for days. I read the entire journal file twice, then a third time. Not because I wanted to, couldn't believe how clearly she had mapped out her inner life while pretending mine didn't matter. She documented her boredom like it was noble. Justified her detachment like it was enlightenment. There was one entry dated nearly a year before I left that read. Sometimes I watch him sleeping and feel nothing. No hate, no warmth, just a dull ache that this is it. This who I promised myself to. And that promise is the cage. I wanted to hate her. Really did. But something inside me still felt pity. Not for who she became, but the version of herself that couldn't recognize stability without mistaking it for prison bars. And that was the part that scared me most. She didn't even know she was cruel. But none of that compared to what I found in the bottom of the folder. Taped inside flap was an old photo, faded, printed from a cheap home printer. It was Harley and a man I didn't recognize. He was older, maybe early 50s, not her father, someone from work. He was holding her waist a little too tight. Her head was tilted like it used to tilt toward me when we first started dating. On the back in her handwriting were the words, "No one can ever know," and right beneath the photo was a folded letter. Unsent. I opened it. It was addressed to someone named Ben. "You said it would never come to this. You said he'd never ask questions, but now he looks at me like he knows. I can't live in this life forever, and you promised I'd never have to. You said we'd handle it if ever got close to the surface. Well, guess what? It's not just close. Here. And I can't breathe when I'm near him anymore. You have to fix this, Ben." There had never been a bin in any of her stories. Not in work talk. Family. No bin on her Facebook friend list. No bin in her phone records I backed up. Who was he? I made a copy of the letter. Took a high-res scan of the photo. Then I called June. She answered immediately as if she'd been waiting. "What now?" "I need to find someone. Name's Ben, possibly connected to High romantically. Could be from before Mazda. Older, might be work-related." There was silence. Then she said, "Wait, what year is the photo from?" No timestamp, but judging by her hair, probably around 2016. Another pause. "I think know who that is." "What?" June sighed. "There was a guy at the clinic. A temp manager just for a few months. Older, real charming, bit too friendly. I think his name was Bennett or Benjamin something. He didn't stay long. Fired after a few patients complained he crossed the line." I nearly dropped the phone. Did Howie ever mention him? Not once. Which is weird now that I think about it. She gossiped about everyone, but never him. Why? Because I just found a letter to him in a folder she thought I'd never see. And in that moment, it hit me. This wasn't just infidelity. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a cover-up. I didn't know the details yet. I didn't know how deep the raw went, but I knew instinctively that whatever happened with this Ben person had changed something in her, poisoned something between us, and she never told me. She just turned down the emotional dimmer switch and watched me fade. I started digging. I called in a favor from an old friend who used to work private security. He had access to databases. I didn't. I gave him what had. A face from a photo, first name, workplace. I didn't even tell him why. Just said I was looking for someone who might have hurt my wife. I know that sounds twisted, but in some part of me I hoped maybe she was manipulated, coerced, that this Ben guy had pulled her into something she couldn't undo. It would have been easier than accepting the other possibility, that she chose all of it. Meanwhile, Haley's social media presence had turned performative. Daily selfies. They quotes about healing and starting fresh. Always staged. Always filtered. She posted a photo with Mazda guy holding hands at a farmer's market. Captioned, "Grateful for realness." I wanted a laugh. I wanted scream. Instead, I just saved it all, added to the timeline. But my silence was almost over. My contact got back to me a few nights later. "Found him," he said. "Ben Hartle used to work in dental practice admin, had some civil complaints. Got a record sealed 5 years ago. Now runs a wellness retreat 2 hours north. Real quiet place. No digital footprint. Like he doesn't want to be found." I stared at the file for a long time. Then I wrote in my notebook, "If want to understand what she became, I need to understand who helped build her." And I made a plan to visit the retreat alone. Not for confrontation, answers. Because the person I was married to, the one who once whispered that I was her home, had been gone long before I vanished. And the man in photograph, he might be the reason why. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even June. I left the studio apartment at 6:10 a.m., drove north for 2 hours, then another 30 minutes off the main road. The GPS stopped working halfway through, but the old paper map from my glove box still had the roads marked. It felt fitting, finding answers with tools from the past. The retreat was buried behind a cluster of pine trees, just off a narrow gravel path with a wooden sign that read Eagle Route Renewal Center. No logos, no contact info, just the kind of place you'd never find unless you were specifically looking for it or trying to disappear. I parked, sat in the car for a few minutes, looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't recognize the man staring back. He looked tired, older than I remembered, but somehow more focused, like someone who'd been underwater too long. and was finally breathing again. I walked up to the main house, a lodge-style cabin, maybe 6 rooms total. There was a woman at the desk, mid-30s, soft-spoken, dressed in natural colors like the building itself. I asked for Ben Hartle. She tilted her head and said, "He doesn't usually take visitors." I handed her my driver's license. "I'm not a visitor. Someone he forgot." She looked at the ID, then back at me. Something shifted in her face. Her hand trembled slightly as she picked up the phone and called someone. No words were spoken. She just said, "He's here." 5 minutes later, he came out. Ben, older than in the photo, gray in the beard, calm in a way that felt rehearsed. He didn't act surprised to see me, didn't ask who I was, just nodded once and said, "Let's talk." We walked out back to a bench under massive pine tree. I expected him to ask me questions why I'd come, what I wanted, but he didn't. He just waited like he already knew. "I'm Warren," I said finally. "I know." Of course he did. "You were with Hai," I said. Not just casually, not just emotionally. It was serious. "You were in the background of my life for years, weren't you?" He looked off into the woods for a long moment. "I was her beginning," he said. "And that made you her middle." "What does that even mean?" I asked, trying not to sound like I was shaking inside. "You wrote her letters. I found them. You disappeared from her life, and she became someone I couldn't recognize." Ben took a breath like man confessing to something he knew could never take back. "She came to the retreat once before it was fully open, broken, confused, angry at herself, the world. She told me you were kind, steady, but that you didn't see her, that she felt like a houseplant someone watered out of routine. That hit harder than I expected. I'd spent years thinking I was the one begging for connection, and now this stranger was telling me she felt invisible. She never said that," I said quietly, "because she didn't know how." Ben replied, "People like Harry, they don't tell the truth directly. They leak it out in size, distance, in affairs. She was looking for someone to reflect chaos back at her. And when I pulled away, she started chasing versions of me over and over. You were her anchor, but she was drowning herself on purpose." I didn't know what to say that. Part of me wanted to argue, but the other part that had lived through her silence, her passive cruelty, her calculated apathy, knew it was true. "She wrote," I said you were going to fix things. Said you promised she wouldn't have to keep lying." Ben looked at me again, this time with something close to sorrow. "She asked me to lie for her. I refused. That's why she cut me off." There it was. He wasn't the puppet master. He was Match, and Hal lit the fire all on her own. I wanted to believe she was manipulated. I said, voice breaking a little despite myself, that there was a reason she turned into someone who could smile at me in the morning and betray at night. "She wanted to be reborn," Ben said. "You don't realize you're the grave until she walks away from you and says she feels alive." That one broke something open in me. I sat silent for a while. Ben didn't say anything else. Eventually, he stood, placed a hand on my shoulder, and said, "You deserved better. But that doesn't mean she knew how to be better." Then he walked away. I stayed on that bench for a long time, watched the pine needles fall one by like they knew how to let go. And when I got back to the apartment that evening, I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just opened my notebook and wrote one line. "She didn't destroy me because she hated me. She destroyed me because she hated who became around me." That night, I slept 8 hours straight for the first time in over a year. But the story wasn't over because the next morning, there was a voicemail on my burner phone from Hai. 3 words. Terrified. Hollow. "I know everything." I must have played that voicemail 20 times before I moved. Just 3 words. "I know everything." But her voice sounded like someone dangling off a cliff. Not angry, not accusatory, just frightened. And Hai never sounded frightened. She was composed even when she lied. Calm even when she twisted the truth. So I did what always do. Wrote it down. Not just the words, but the tone, the breath between syllables, the desperation tucked into her throat. Because for the first time in this entire mess, she wasn't in control. She didn't know where I was. She didn't what I had. She didn't know what new. And now she was guessing. It didn't take long to confirm my suspicion. Someone must have tipped her off. Maybe she caught wind of June making quiet calls to the dental board. Maybe she heard from someone at her old clinic that a man named Ree had been asking questions. Maybe, and this was my favorite theory, Ben said something. A final ghost whisper from the past. But what did she mean by everything? Did she know about the footage, the emails, photo of her and Ben? Or was she bluffing? I didn't call her back. I needed uncertain. Instead, I focused on something I hadn't touched in weeks, the financials. Hai and I shared a joint account for most of our marriage, but around 2 years ago, she convinced me to simplify things. Said it would be easier if she handled daily household expenses on her own credit card while I paid the mortgage and utilities. I agreed. Why wouldn't I? I thought we were a team, but now with a clearer head and some time on my hands, I pulled old statements. I created a spreadsheet, categorized transactions by date, vendor, and purpose. First, it was boring stuff. Groceries, gas, clothing. But then I found it. A recurring charge from a company I didn't recognize. Wilmette Private Holdings for $170 a month. Regular as clockwork. I searched it online. Nothing. Just a P.O. box in Oregon and a disconnected number. So, I called in a favor from a buddy of mine who used to work at a bank in Chicago. Quiet guy, Excelist. I sent him the company name and asked if it looked like a shell corporation. His reply was almost instant. Definitely. Who's hiding what? That's when I got serious. Went to the bank alley and I used to use requested copies of the last 24 months of account transfers under her name. Technically, I wasn't supposed to get them, but I still had power of attorney on file from a few years ago, and the clerk didn't ask too many questions. What I saw made my hands go cold. Hai had been draining our savings in $500 to $800 chunks. Not fast enough to trigger suspicion, not obvious enough to look like theft. But over 2 years, she'd moved nearly $19,000 into Wilmette Holdings. And I'll never forget the label attached to the last transfer. Exit prep final. Exit. That word punched the air out of my lungs. This wasn't just infidelity. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a full-blown plan. Hai had been slowly building her own escape financially, emotionally, logistically while pretending to be tired, disconnected, bored. She hadn't checked out randomly. She'd been preparing to vanish from my life while making me think I was the one slipping away. And yet, she hadn't gone through with it. Why had something gone wrong? Was she waiting for me to explode so she could play victim and walk away clean? Or was she always hoping I do exactly what did, disappear first and save her the guilt? I didn't have answers, but did have something she'd never expect. A presentation. That's right. I turned every piece of data, every receipt, screenshot, text message, email thread, and surveillance image into a neat, bulletproof PDF. I labeled it archive for legal purposes. But that wasn't the truth. It was never about court, about clarity, about giving the version of me that sat silent at 1,000 dinners a voice that could not be ignored. The next day, I sent it to her. Not with a message, not warning, just the file, one email, no subject line from an anonymous address. Less than 10 minutes later, my burner phone rang again. I let it ring 5 times before answering. She was crying. Not dramatic sobs, the kind that rip through a throat when someone realizes they've lost control of their own story. "You're going to ruin me," she whispered. "No," I said. "You did that a long time ago. I'm just making sure the mirror finally reflects it." There was silence, then something unexpected. "I was gonna leave before you did," she said. "But I didn't want to be the villain." I almost laughed. "You're not the villain, Harry." I said, "You're the writer. You just ran out of paper." I hung up. That night, June came over and brought Chinese takeout. We sat on the floor of studio, watched dumb sitcoms from our childhood, and laughed about things that had nothing to do with betrayal or divorce or hidden accounts. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone waiting to be chosen. I felt whole. But the next morning, one final twist arrived. A letter in the mail from someone else entirely. Inside was a single sentence. "You should ask what really happened the night your brother died." I stared at the letter for a long time. "You should ask Callie what really happened the night your brother died." It was handwritten in thin, precise print. No signature, no return address. The envelope smelled faintly of something familiar, like the waiting room at Haley's old clinic. That detail chilled me more than the letter itself. Because the night my brother died, Harry was there. That was the night she held me while I sobbed on the kitchen floor. That was the night she said, "You don't have to carry this alone." But what if she had been part of it? I didn't want to believe it. I truly didn't. My brother Dean died in a car accident. That's what we were told. Hit a patch of ice, lost control. He'd been coming back from a late-night bar shift. I'd always felt guilt because I'd invited him over that night. And he said couldn't make it. And now this letter suggested that maybe Hai had known something I didn't. Maybe even lied about where she was that night. But you know what? I didn't chase it. I didn't call her, interrogate her. I didn't sink back into the pit she'd spent years building around me. Because in that moment, I realized something important, liberating, even if she had been connected to it. I didn't need her truth to define mine anymore. That's what she never understood. That I wasn't searching for closure from her. I was building something far better, peace within myself. So, I burned a letter, literally took it out behind the studio apartment, lit a match and dropped it into an old coffee tin, watched it curl and vanish. That was her final chance to pull me back into the dark, and I refused to give her the satisfaction. The weeks that followed were quiet and beautiful. I adopted a rescue dog, wiry mutt with one floppy ear and a growl worse than his bite. I named him Chance. Felt symbolic. June convinced me to take a short-term contract job in Vermont. I packed my things, loaded up my car, and drove with the windows down, the music loud, and the GPS turned off. No destination, just momentum. One evening, as the sun was going down over the hills, I pulled off to the side of the road and sat on the hood of car. Chance laid his head on my lap. I stared at the sky, and for first time in years, I realized wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. I wasn't fantasizing about a different ending. This was the ending, and it was enough. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to publish the PDF or humiliate her, publicly prove anything to anyone. I had already won. Because while Hai was still rewriting her life and filtered Instagram posts half-truths, I had something better. Silence, clarity, freedom. People think healing looks like a sunrise or grand speech or some courtroom scene where the liar gets exposed. It's not. Healing looks like making breakfast alone and being okay with it. It looks like walking past the place where you used to hurt and not flinching. It looks like being forgotten by the wrong person and found by the right version of yourself. One day, maybe she'll realize what she lost. Maybe not. That's not my burden anymore. I disappeared that morning, not because I was weak, but because finally strong enough to let go. And that saved my